The former president, Jacob Zuma, is charged with bringing the ANC into disrepute and for campaigning for a different political party while he is an ANC member. And that disciplinary hearing is expected to get underway today at 12. Political analyst Professor Dirk Kotze joins me now to share some perspective on these developments. Dirk, good morning. Welcome. Thank you, as always, for your time. So the hearing, as we have been hearing, is planned to be a virtual one. The MK party is insisting on an in-person appearance for the former president. Failing this, they say he will be seeking an urgent court interdict to halt the proceedings. And just looking over the last couple of months to this particular moment, it would be interesting to look at how you characterize these developments on what might be, to some people, small issues about, should you be there in person or not, but on a different level, quite significant and quite important.
Yes, I think President Zuma is the master of using opportunities like that for his own to his own advantage very well. We've seen it with all the court cases before the election where MK was involved. How that actually, I would say, popularized the MK, gave them a lot of publicity, a lot of marketing by implication during the time of the elections, and I think he wants to do the same now again, to bring the focus back to MK, to be able to present in public, in front or with the media, his case, and that will be a case against the ANC. It's not going to be about himself and where he stands at the moment, but it will be, I think, a full-blown attack on the Ramaphosa leadership in the ANC. So he wants to use it to the maximum and in the most effective way, and that is when you can do it in person.
So we focus a lot when we have these discussions on Mr. Zuma's strategy, and we'll talk, in fact, about his political strategy in just a moment. But there is also the ANC, who is a counterpart in these proceedings. What do they have to gain by, for example, insisting that it be held in a particular way, making the decision to postpone this until after the elections and so on? They also have their own political strategy and objectives here. How do you read that?
Well, I think it's two-pronged. The first one is to minimize what I've just explained about what President Zuma wants to achieve through this process, and that is to publicize it as much as possible and use it as an attack against the ANC. And secondly, there is in the ANC, amongst its members, the feeling that President Zuma is actually challenging the ANC by stating or claiming that he's still an ANC member. And that, in a sense, is undermining the ANC's authority. And that is why they insist that there must be this public process of removing him, of expelling them from the ANC as a member. So in that sense, it is meant to reassert the ANC's authority in relation to President Zuma. Because if this is hanging in the air, it's unfinished business. Many people will say, by implication, he is actually keeping the ANC hostage in this respect.
And perhaps it's unfair to ask the question in this way. I'm going to go ahead and tell me what you think. That in the game of political strategy so far, it would seem that the benefit has been to the former president, given the political moves that he has made over the last many months, the formation of MK, their strong debut showing in the recent elections, over 2 million votes. Now the third biggest political party in the country, 58 seats in the National Assembly, and the stance that he has consistently taken against the ANC, notwithstanding the main one, campaigning for MK while remaining an ANC member. It seems, if we had to characterize this as a power play, Mr. Zuma is in the pound seat.
To some extent, yes. Obviously, from his perspective, he will say that is the case. I think if we look at the now, currently, in terms of the public perspective, it might be more, in a sense, there might be different interpretations or nuances of it. MK didn't achieve what they wanted to achieve. They talk about a two-thirds majority. They have now, by implication, conceded that they don't have a case at the electoral court, although the court will still convene about that. At the same time, the 14% versus a two-thirds majority is a huge difference. So I think from those who look at it closer, not just from a sort of a public perspective, it is not was not in that case such a major achievement for MK. Where they did make a major impact, obviously, was in KwaZulu-Natal, and I think that will become the main focus of the party for the rest of the 5 years. It is the biggest opposition party. You mentioned is the biggest party, but it's merely the biggest opposition party. So in that sense, they can play an important role and I would regard them as the official opposition in parliament in that respect. But whether that is what they really want to do in order to be able to make an, a, re- a definitive impact on the public opinion, I'm not sure that they will be able to do that.
Do you not think? Yeah. No, go ahead.
Especially if they become involved in the nuts and bolts of parliamentary work, which is not always very dramatic and very much sort of in the public domain.
Don't you think it's a little bit ungenerous, Dirk, to characterize it in that way? And I'm just trying to look at it from the other perspective as well. Despite, shooting for the moon, they missed, of course, their objective, and they've ended up in a fairly enviable position, coming from the ground up with such a powerful showing, notwithstanding their objective to get that two-thirds majority. They're still untested. We're waiting for Parliament to open tomorrow, and then we'll see what their record's going to be like in the House. Of course, certain things, as you've said, they made very strong criticisms of the electoral process. They've kind of abandoned, pursuing, the whole concept of vote rigging or how they might have been undermined in those elections according to them, and evidence that we have not yet seen. But it's still early days. We have to see how they'll perform. They initially said they weren't going to sign up. Now they took their votes of office, and they're going to be in Parliament.
Yes, and in that sense you are correct. But what I'm referring to is that they make statements and they had to go back on these statements. They promised, they actually claimed that they will have a two-thirds majority, and they are 50% short on that. They claimed and said that the election was rigged, and they have to now withdraw that.
Yeah.
They said they're not going to join Parliament, and they joined Parliament. So from a public perspective, these are signs that they can't keep to their commitments or their promises. And I think this is what is in the public domain is at this stage the problem. What they are going to do in KwaZulu-Natal is something different. And in that respect, I think we have to preserve our opinion about what exactly is going to happen there.
Let's look at today's proceedings, Dirk, and the ANC constitution, and specifically Rule 25, Zuma's actions to not campaign or vote for the ANC, tantamount to a breach of the party's constitution. Is the matter or the case against him as cut and dried, given the party's NEC initially, as we've been reminded, opted not to expel him months ago?
Well, I think on paper, in terms of constitutionally speaking, it's very difficult to for him to defend himself. I think there is one component which he might try to do, and that's to say that MK is actually not a party opposed to the ANC, but it is actually part of the ANC's family, because that is how he presented it at on the 16th of December last year, when he publicly became associated with MK. But otherwise, in terms of the role that he played, the fact that MK was effectively campaigning against the ANC, that they opposed the ANC, that in, for example, KwaZulu-Natal's government now, that they are not together with the ANC in that government, that will make it all very difficult in order to argue that he was actually doing it on behalf of the ANC.
I want to go to this. Again, we've mentioned that the former president has nominated a proxy. According to the MKs and Klamula Ndlela, he will be represented by former ANC NEC member and commander of Umkhonto weSizwe, Tony Yengeni. Maybe just a quick comment on that before I move to the final question, Dirk.
Yes, well, Tony Yengeni is one of his most trusted persons around him and supporters. And I think he will be, in a sense, be able to represent President Zuma very well. I think what he also wants to do, President Zuma, is possibly to preserve his position, because I think it is very likely that some or other litigation will follow after this, that he will take it to court and challenge this process. And then he will try to avoid by saying, or the counter argument to say, but you actually participated in it.
Okay, I want to go then to the National Disciplinary Committee. This is the NDC. It's, we understand, an autonomous committee of the NEC, which is the National Executive Committee. They are conducting the hearing in accordance with the ANC's constitution and disciplinary rules and regulations. We know Party SG Fikile Mbalula will be leading evidence in that hearing. How stringent would they have to be?
Well, they have to be very stringent because this is a semi-legal process. Although it's not done in a court, it's not done by a lawyer like a judge or a magistrate. The procedure must comply with all the legal requirements of that, for example, the audi alteram partem rule, the fact that there will be cross-examination, the way in which the evidence will be tested, that's presented both by the ANC as well as by President Zuma's side, and then the conclusion. So it is in essence, it's very similar to that of a judicial process, but it is done within the ANC, and it's not done by judicial persons. But so they have to be following the procedures and the constitution as strictly as possible, because again, we know that President Zuma tends to challenge these things immediately if it goes against them in court reviews.
Are we likely to see that here, do you think? I mean, if it goes adversely for Mr. Zuma?
I think there's a good chance for that. And it is, if he takes it on review, whatever the outcome, especially if it's negative for him, it will create another opportunity for him to be able to do it more and then in public and not as it is now online.
I mean, this will be a big moment for the ANC, right? If it does go the way that they want it to go, which is, that he is found guilty of having breached all of these, and them having to let go of a president of the party, a significant figure, breaking with their own, I don't want to say breaking with their own tradition, but it will become a historic, ignominious milestone for the ANC. And maybe just a comment, Prof. Kotze, before I let you go, on what all of this has meant, for the ANC, its own reputation, its own notion of self politically as well.
Yes, it is very important because in other cases, some members of the ANC withdrew or left the ANC. The only other comparable, well, not really comparable, but similar process was that when most of the Youth League were expelled from the ANC, Julius Malema, Floyd Shivambu, and others, and when they formed the EFF. So, but they were not at that prominent level of President Zuma. So this is an absolutely unique situation if it goes in that direction. And for the ANC, I think from President Ramaphosa's point of view, I think what it means is that it's in a sense a final drawing of a line in the sand with the faction that was known in the past as the Radical Economic Transformation Group, because many of them have actually went to MK. So that history in the ANC to a large extent may finally come to a conclusion if this happens today or very soon after today.
Professor Dirk Kotze, as always, appreciate your time and your analysis. Thank you very much for that. The much anticipated disciplinary hearing of former President Jacob Zuma getting underway.